In Episode 30, Evaluate Attack Surface Using Intelligence and Context, we focus on giving you actionable visibility into the points where systems are exposed and the conditions that make those exposures exploitable. Attack surface can sound like a static concept, but in real environments, it shifts with every feature rollout, configuration tweak, and integration. When you learn to see that surface clearly, you stop treating security as a vague posture and start treating it as a set of concrete, observable contact points. You also gain a more realistic sense of what an attacker can actually touch and chain together, instead of worrying about everything equally. This episode is about turning that visibility into decisions you can defend. A useful way to begin is by enumerating the assets, interfaces, dependencies, and privileges that form your effective attack surface. Assets include not just servers and applications, but data stores, message queues, management consoles, and build systems that an attacker might value or leverage. Interfaces cover external APIs, web front ends, administrative portals, integration hooks, and batch channels that accept input. Dependencies include third-party services, libraries, and infrastructure layers that influence your exposure even if you do not control their internals. Privileges describe where powerful roles, credentials, or automated workflows exist, since those represent high-value targets and potential pivot points. When these elements are listed together, the surface becomes something you can describe instead of guess at. However, modern environments contain many short-lived and dynamic components, so you must deliberately include ephemeral elements in your surface view. Serverless endpoints that appear only when invoked, temporary links used for file sharing or password resets, and debug toggles activated during troubleshooting all expand exposure while they exist. Preview environments for features, experiments, or demos often run with relaxed controls and incomplete monitoring, yet handle real data and integrations. If your inventory only covers long-lived hosts and services, these temporary features become invisible vulnerabilities. Treating ephemeral elements as first-class citizens in your attack surface keeps you aligned with how your systems actually behave rather than how diagrams suggest they behave. External scanning and attack surface management tools can help, but only when their results are correlated with your own inventories. Scanners may discover forgotten subdomains, open ports, or exposed login pages that your documentation does not mention, which is a strong signal of shadow assets. At the same time, your internal inventory should contain systems that scanners cannot see directly, such as restricted management interfaces or private integrations. By reconciling these views, you can distinguish between expected and unexpected exposures and decide where deeper investigation is needed. This correlation step is where you start to collapse the gap between perceived and actual attack surface. Exploitability cannot be judged from listings alone, so you need to weigh what you find using current security intelligence. Common vulnerabilities and exposures, CVE, records, exploit proof of concepts, and notes about attacker tradecraft in your sector all provide signals about which components are actively targeted. A web service running a slightly outdated library may be low priority if there are no known exploitation techniques, while a widely abused remote access product may demand immediate attention even if it appears fully patched. Public vulnerability data, internal incident reports, and threat research together shape a more realistic sense of danger. Using intelligence this way prevents you from spending the same energy on obscure theoretical paths as on well-known, actively exploited weaknesses. Business context is just as important as technical detail when you evaluate attack surface, because not all exposures matter equally to the organization. Critical transactions, such as payment flows or safety-related controls, elevate the importance of the interfaces and components that support them. Seasonality, like peak shopping periods or annual enrollment windows, can raise the impact of downtime or integrity failures during specific times. User sensitivity, such as handling personal, financial, or health-related information, affects how regulators and customers will respond to incidents. Regulatory exposure, including sector-specific obligations or cross-border data rules, further amplifies the consequences tied to certain systems. When you place surface elements in this context, prioritization becomes more honest and defensible. Another important dimension is how exposure paths actually work from an attacker's perspective, not just how assets appear in isolation. Unauthenticated reachability is often the first question. Which services can be touched directly from the internet or from less trusted internal zones without credentials? Chained weaknesses, such as a low-privilege web endpoint feeding into a misconfigured message bus that touches sensitive systems, can create powerful attack paths. Privilege escalations, whether through shared credentials, overbroad roles, or poorly isolated management features, can transform seemingly minor footholds into major compromises. Mapping these paths shows where small openings might realistically become large breaches. Misconfigurations, weak defaults, and stale access often constitute a large portion of practical attack surface, and they tend to persist across environments. Defaults like open management ports, permissive cross-origin rules, or overly generous file sharing settings can move from lab to production if not challenged. Stale access includes accounts that should have been revoked, roles that no longer match actual job duties, and trust relationships left in place after projects end. Differences between development, staging, and production environments can create inconsistent protections, where a path blocked in one place remains open elsewhere. Identifying these patterns consistently helps you address entire families of risk rather than isolated instances. Because systems change constantly, you should quantify risk deltas after meaningful changes and recalculate attack surface as features roll out or retire. A new integration may add endpoints, tokens, and privileges that need to be accounted for explicitly, while retiring an old feature should reduce exposed assets if done carefully. Recording how many externally reachable services you had before and after a release, or how many high-privilege roles were created or removed, turns change into measurable impact. This habit helps you avoid the quiet accumulation of technical and security debt that comes from small, untracked increments. Over time, you build a history of how design and deployment choices influence exposure. Prioritizing reductions is where evaluation becomes practical action, taking the form of closing ports, disabling endpoints, restricting origins, and retiring features. Closing unused ports and protocols shrinks the surface area available for opportunistic scanning and attacks. Disabling rarely used endpoints, especially those with powerful capabilities, removes potential footholds that might otherwise be forgotten. Restricting origins and tightening access rules at gateways can prevent cross-site abuse and limit who can reach sensitive APIs in the first place. Retiring legacy features that no longer justify their risk gives you a double benefit: less code to maintain and fewer ways for attackers to enter. Each reduction simplifies not just security, but operations as well. Improvements should never be assumed. They must be validated through rescans, logs, synthetic probes, and production telemetry. Rescanning after changes confirms that removed services and ports are truly gone and that new paths did not appear inadvertently. Log reviews can show whether previously noisy endpoints have quieted down and whether error patterns have shifted in expected ways. Synthetic probes, such as scripted health checks or simulated client requests, can test that allowed traffic still flows while blocked paths remain closed. Production telemetry trends, including authentication failures, anomalous traffic patterns, or latency shifts, provide an additional reality check. Validation is what turns configuration changes into evidence-backed improvements. Attack surface is not a one-time assessment. It demands recurring reviews aligned with the rhythms of your organization. Release cycles are natural points to revisit what has changed, confirming that new deployments did not reintroduce retired endpoints or loosen key controls. Acquisitions and major partnerships add entire landscapes of assets, dependencies, and access relationships that must be integrated into your view. Infrastructure shifts, such as cloud migrations or data center consolidations, change network paths, trust boundaries, and management planes. Scheduling reviews around these events makes evaluation a normal part of planning, not an emergency reaction. If you pause and look across these practices, a coherent pattern emerges that is worth carrying forward. Inventory gives you a baseline of assets and interfaces. Intelligence and business context tell you which exposures truly matter. Analysis of exposure paths reveals where attackers can realistically move. Reduction efforts close or narrow those paths. Validation confirms that changes worked, and recurring cadence keeps the picture accurate over time. Together, these elements turn attack surface from a vague concern into a managed attribute of your environment. The pattern is reusable across systems, technologies, and organizational scales. To close, the most practical step you can take is to choose one surface reduction and see it through end to end. Identify an unnecessary endpoint, debugging interface, or legacy integration that no longer carries its weight and value compared to its risk. Confirm what depends on it, plan a safe removal or restriction, and communicate the change to those affected so that surprises are minimized. Afterward, verify through scans, logs, or probes that it is truly gone, and record the improvement as part of your attack surface history. Small, deliberate reductions like this build both capability and confidence, turning evaluation into an ongoing practice rather than a once-a-year exercise. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.